You're about to listen to an archived episode of The Night Shift with Zeno Hiroman. This is brought to you commercial-free by the Surfcast Podcast. If you're interested in more historical, educational, and entertaining surf fishing content, check out weekly episodes of the Surfcast Podcast available today on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts, including www.surfcastpodcast.com.
Well, usually I was disappointed when the bluefish would show up before the bass. You know, I would hope to get in a few days before the blues would show up, but there were a few years where the blues showed up before the bass, and it was kind of sad. But, you know, I understand the times have changed.
No, I hear you. But were you the early fisherman, meaning really early in the season?
Well, yeah, I always fished for usually many days before I caught fish, other than when I was a kid, and even in my teens, I used to, fish some sandworms on the bottom in Little Neck Bay, but that was basically more of a social thing with some of my friends. But once I started fishing like the jetty, I was almost always there for the first bass, I mean. And usually, some nights I fished, some years I fished like 10 nights without anyone catching anything until they came in, but I didn't want to miss anything. So the first fish were usually big, on the bigger side. So
yeah, got you. I don't know. Some people like to start late in May. Some people out there in Lilco doing the winter time. So everybody does kind of a different thing,
Yeah, I mean, I played around at Lilco. I mean, I did a little of that, but it was never really a serious thing. It was just to kind of shake the cobwebs off and get out with a couple of friends.
Yeah. So your first station in the spring would actually be breezy?
Well, when I was a kid, I would fish the North Shore first because there would be action there first as soon as all the fish dumped out of the river. But I mean, after a while, then I wasn't really into, fishing for like little fish and things like that. So I'd rather get skunks fishing for big fish than I would, catching a couple of 5-pounders or something.
No, how old were you when you started fishing breezy?
I started fishing breezy in 1976 or maybe 75. So that would have made me 19 or 20.
Wow, that's pretty young. Was it big crew already fishing there, or was it small, tight crew as you experienced it later?
No, there was definitely a regular bunch of guys there. Most of them, luckily, came after work and fished daylight hours for a few hours and then into dusk, and then they usually left, I assume, because, they were normal and they had families and jobs and things like that. So during the night, there were also like regular guys that would come. So I would end up seeing the same people almost every single night. And then there would be like a sprinkling of guest appearance people who probably would never come back after one night there. So
was it a difficult place to fish?
Excuse me?
Was it a difficult place to fish?
Very difficult. I think it's an extremely difficult place to fish. The rocks are slippery. The jetty is low and crumbled up. When I used to fish there were like 2 or 3 safe spots where even when the water was rolling in, you knew you had to make it to a certain point, and then you would safe from the roller, and then when the roller passed you could continue to the next safe spot, and then you could make it all the way to the tip. So yeah, it was dangerous, but I mean, all my friends, were pretty adept at it, so we did all right. No one fell that I'm aware of.
How were you accepted there when you were, younger? Was it a matter of just showing up consistently until people took you seriously? Because, you were younger than most people there.
No doubt. Well, the first night I showed up with a crack 300 and an 1165. I had no idea where I was going. A friend told me to bring the same type of equipment I would fish under the Montauk Lighthouse. So that's what I brought. So anyway, needless to say, after that night, I was at Mike's Tackle in Sheepshead Bay the next day, picking up a blank and wrapping up my conventional. I wrapped up the conventional that day and just fished it from night 2 until I stopped fishing there. So, yeah, I'm sure I wasn't very popular with an 11.5-foot rod, but no one grabbed it out of my hands and threw it in the water. So I guess I was doing all right. I did get a few fish too, so I was pretty lucky. And then after that, then I was just there every night. I was there more than anyone else, or as much as anyone else. So really, what can anybody say? From there, when you're there all the time, well, then I'm as serious as you are, right? So.
Yeah, that's true. Tell me about the why conventional versus spinning in that particular location.
Well, I know things have most likely changed because I do have friends that fish there and they send me pictures. But the spinning rod, well, there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, the conventional rod, you have much better control over the fish, in my opinion, and with the conventional, we were fishing all braided line. So the braided line had virtually no stretch. The monofilament, I mean, if you ever walked off 600 feet of line, I have, and see actually how far out that you were actually fishing sometimes. When you engage the reel with, let's say, with micron, you can't even walk 2 or 3 feet, and that line is either going to break or something. But with mono, you could walk 20 and 30 and 40 feet with that line, like a rubber band. You keep stretching it and stretching it and stretching it. So if you set the hook with mono, you're really not setting the hook at all. You may think you're setting the hook, but it was just very inefficient. The conventional just worked out much, much better. And it was only like one guy there who was a kid at the time who fished spinning. But the problem is with the spinning, well, eventually he did go to a squitter and a conventional after several years and he got older. But the problem is mono drifts at a totally different rate than the micron drifted at. So it drifts faster. So if somebody is casting in rotation in front of me with mono, I could basically cast right after them and I know they're going to drift faster than me. So that won't be a problem. But if somebody is casting behind me with mono, then I have to wait an extra long time before they can cast because of that fact, because who wants to tangle? So when you have one guy doing things differently than 6 guys, it's the one guy who's going to cause the problem. You know, whether he knows what he's doing or not, you can't change the rate at which the 2 lines drift. So it is what it is. But for the most part, everyone fished conventional there.
Now you just mentioned the drifting and the walking and the stretching. What does that mean? I don't think most people can actually relate to what you're saying. I know what you're saying because I've seen it, and you actually see that in Florida these days at Sebastian Inlet any more than you see at Long Island. But explain me the scene.
Well, I was always curious, actually, how far out my line was getting, because even in the daytime, with micron is an ivory white color, so it's quite visible, provides a nice contrast to the water. So during the daytime, you know, you cast out and you watch where your line goes. It went nowhere near where I thought it was going when I was, let's say, doing it at night. So it really was, I was totally fishing a different area than I really assumed I was fishing. So then I was wondering, well, how far out am I getting these hits? I mean, I would let my line all the way out almost to the very bottom of the arbor. It was kind of like, you know, you would just do it to see, you know, if you hook a fish all the way out there and you only have like 2 or 3 feet of line left on your spool, it probably isn't going to end well. But everyone would keep pushing the envelope and pushing the envelope. So I was wondering, I wonder how far out I'm really, those hits really are. So I just walked off my whole with a spool on the beach, attached to my truck. And then I wanted to see how much I could stretch the line afterwards. It stretched very, very little, which I assume that stretch was my monofilament leader. That was the part that was stretching. And I was just blown away by how far out I was actually fishing. So then after a while, I tried getting a reel with a larger capacity. So I moved up to, I tried Ambassador 10,000. It probably held an extra 100 yards of line. So I was really, really, drifting where I couldn't drift before. But the reel just wasn't nearly as good as the squitter, in my opinion, for the type of fishing I was doing. So I ended up going back to the squitter and selling off all the Ambassador 10,000s.
But were you stationary on those rocks, or were you fishing in a lineup where you moved with the cast?
You have to fish in rotation.
That's the question that I'm asking.
Unless the tide's not moving yet. Like if the tide is just starting to pick up, you could just cast and retrieve and cast and retrieve and cast and retrieve, and no one's really going to be in anyone's way as long as you time everything correctly. But once the current starts pulling out, then you have to fish in rotation. And I mean, no two nights are the same. Sometimes the rip is pulling to the left. Sometimes it's pulling straight out. Sometimes it's not even going around the corner. So it kind of really, what made the most difference is the guys you were fishing with. If you were fishing there with 5 or 6 guys and you knew them and they were the regular guys, there was never a problem. There was never a tangle. There was never an argument. But as soon as you throw a wrench into the machinery, one guy can really kind of take out the whole jetty. And that's why I think people really weren't very friendly. They weren't unfriendly. They were just neutral. And that's the way I was. I didn't do anything to screw anyone up, but I didn't do anything to help anyone either. It's like people either have to sink or they have to swim, and it's up to them to do so. It's an individual sport.
But this was a kind of like a fine oiled machine when it worked. And when you threw just one little bad cast in it, the whole thing falls apart for most of the guys in a rotation. Tell me about... Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. Give me a thought on that.
No, I mean, a lot of guys, people, it's no different than it is nowadays from what I can see. Although I'm not fishing, I still go online and look at the sites. But people don't want to put in the homework. What they want to do is they want to type something on the computer, wait for somebody who may know nothing or less than them to answer them, and then take their word for it and then do what they say. That's really not the way things work. Guys who showed up, they thought they could buy a Lupo plug at some place, a chain store somewhere, and show up on the jetty, and then they were going to compete with the 6 or 7 guys who were there. And boy, did they get an awakening pretty quick. They had no idea what their plug was doing. They had no idea how to tune it. They had no idea about bending this or bending that. People showed up. They showed up without gaffs. No one would gaff their fish. No one would help them. And that's just the way it was. I mean, you showed all the way. You came all the way here. You didn't have a truck, so you walked all this way to come out, and you crawled all the way out to the tip of this jetty, and you don't have the right stuff to fish with. Well, that's why most of them didn't come back after they lost a fish at the jetty, or they complained how unfriendly everybody was, or sometimes they even would try to grab somebody's gaff and use it. No one uses anyone else's gaff. You use your own gaff. And if you don't have a gaff, well, then you figure something else out. Why'd you come here without a gaff? So that's just the way it was.
I don't see that as an unfriendly thing. I see that as you having to pay your dues, learn, and come back next time more prepared. That's how I see it. I understand some people are going to look at that and go like, wow, that's so unfriendly not to help. But I don't see it that way. But maybe I'm a little bit of an old school more than most people.
Well, I didn't see it that way either. I mean, after my first night there with my Kraken 1165, nobody had to tell me that was the wrong tackle to use. I was horrified that I was using it. So, but that's what I really didn't even know where I was going. But like I said, by the second night I had a conventional, and before I told any of my friends, I told them, go to Mike's, grab this blank, and there was a blank he had recommended, and all my friends, no one went without a conventional. Now, Russell was living in Breezy Point, so my friends and I met Russell there, and we got friendly afterwards. He was already using the conventional because he was probably fishing there for 5 years before I ever showed up. So we came with the right stuff after that.
What
You could
about
tell right away?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you could tell right away when someone showed up with a spinning rod. It was almost like, I know guys are probably using only spinning rods there nowadays. I don't really know, but when a guy showed up with a spinning rod, it wasn't going to be a good night.
Was there anything that you guys would, and this is a off question, not necessarily, well, it's related to it, but will you guys do anything to anyone who came with a spinning rod to discourage them from doing that again, or would you just leave it alone and let them learn on their own? But like, you wouldn't sabotage them in any way, would you? Because all these stories about, guys like cutting their line and all,
Never.
Yeah, yeah.
I never cut anyone's line in my entire life, and I don't think anyone ever cut mine. If that happened, I think there would have been a big problem, because if someone would have cut my line, I would have known they cut it, and they would have known that I known that they cut it. So there would have been an issue. But no, you didn't have to do anything to anybody. You just have to watch them flounder in their own inefficiency. I mean, I watch guys, they couldn't splice line together. Their splice would come on as soon as they had a fish on. They would do this. Their knots would break. I mean, you name it. I seen everything. Their snaps would open up, everything. You name it. But no, you didn't have to do anything to anyone. You watch people, have a lot of problems. If they couldn't pick up on why they were having problems by looking at the other people around them, like the rest of the equation, well, how come I'm the only one having a problem and none of these guys seem to be having any issues? I mean, several nights guys would come and they would attempt to fish for like 10 or 15 minutes. And when they saw that they were just not geared up for it, they would go and sit and just watch. They would watch for hours and hours just to see how things worked. And those guys I had a lot more respect for, because they realized that they were the wrench in the machinery. And rather than take everybody out, they learned by their mistake and didn't get in anybody's way.
I've done that. I've done that at Mauritius when I started, and I was so overwhelmed that I just sat on the rocks and watched. And I was like, I have a wrong tackle. I don't have bucktails that are heavy enough. I'm tying everybody up, and I'm pissing everybody off in process. And I'm just not going to force it with a bucktail that's half of the size that it should be. The only reason I mentioned that is I feel that sometimes people make shit up as the years go on, and maybe attribute to not yourself personally, but your crew about like, oh, well, I even heard stories of the guys in Campo's crews or the guys under the Montauk Lighthouse used to sharpen on inside a bucktail where it would become a razor so they cut your line. I'm like, that is insane. You would weaken the bucktail to the point if you get a fish on that the bucktail would just snap, wouldn't it?
So many things that I've read, for years I didn't go online. I started getting calls and things from people and about some of the ridiculous things that seem to have been written. But no, none of my friends ever did any of that to anybody that I'm aware of. No, I would bet my life they never did. So it wasn't necessary. People were they were their own worst enemies for the most part, not only about that spot. In spots in general, if you look, people are their own worst enemies. They don't do their homework. They don't do their preparation. They show up and they expect instant gratification and instant success, and it just doesn't work that way.
I said, I agree with you 100%, but I kind of wanted to get that out because I've heard stories over the years, and I personally never believed them, but I just kind of wanted to hear from you because, I don't know. I think it's needed to be said. I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel it needed to be said or confirmed. About the jetty at Breezy. Now, this is a very different way of fishing than most of the other places, meaning with the drifting and rotation. Like, you don't generally do that in Montauk on the rocks, and you don't do that in Block on the rocks. You didn't do that in the Cape Cod. You have done this basically on the inlets. And I am interested to know, when you say that you dumped a whole spool of line in the inlet, what exactly are you fishing with? You're not just throwing any plugs out there. We're talking specialized stuff, right?
Well, Danny's plugs. I mean, I had Adams before Danny, so I started with that. And then I made some homemade plugs because Adams weren't, I mean, they were still semi-easy to get, but I didn't at that time have the connections for them. So I made my own swimming plugs as well. And then I ended up getting Danny's. And then a year or so later, maybe a year and a half later, I met Donnie, and then I started getting Donnie's. And that was it. And the only commercial plugs you can buy were either an Adam 40 or a Lupo Danny. And Adam 40 is nobody, everyone's afraid to bend lips and bend. It's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. But anyway, I wasn't afraid to bend anything. It's like I paid for that plug. I could do with it what I want, right? I'll figure out what works best for me. And there just weren't a lot of plugs. If you didn't have an in with Danny and Donnie, which basically everyone on the jetty knew Danny, if they were a regular. And later on, the Donnie was kept under wraps as much as possible. But eventually, of course, people found out about that too. But if you weren't fishing with Danny's and Donnie's or Adam 40s, you were basically really reducing your chances of success greatly. I have seen plenty of Lupo plugs that caught fish well, but the average person using a Lupo out there, if they were using a Lupo, you could tell right away that the only reason to use a Lupo is they couldn't get a real Danny. I never seen a Lupo outperform Danny, and I've seen Danny boats catch a lot of fish over the years. So,
why metal lips? What is the special thing about metal lips? You can drift other plugs in the inlet.
What plug do you think would work better in the inlet? A metal lip you could back swim. A metal lip you could reel in for the entire retrieve. I've seen guys there throw eels and daughters and everything else. Metal lips just work better there, so that's what we use, metal lips and bucktails. But I don't think I ever caught a fish there on a daughter. Yeah, I know there were fish there caught on daughters, but for me to take a space up in my bag with a plug, it's got to be a plug that I think is going to provide me my best opportunity. I'm not going to use something that I don't think is the right plug to use.
I mean, there's a lot of metal lips out there. Are these metal lips designed to deep dive? Okay, so here's the thing. I know exactly which metal lips they use. Obviously, I'm a bigger fan of Adam 40 as anyone is. But for the general public, like, were these metal lips deep diving metal lips, or they're regular metal lips, or why would you pick one plug over another?
For the general public, there were no metal lips available other than Adam 40s or Lupos. There was no selection. So people couldn't, that's the problem, is people couldn't get the plugs we were using. Surely no one is going to show them the plugs we were using or tell them what they were. They just knew that they didn't have what they needed. So they would go into like Herman's or a chain store or a tackle shop or anything and buy anything that was big and wooden or just a big plug. And that's what they would use. But they would have no idea what the plug did. They would have no idea, what they were looking for. They would have no idea. They just would cast it out and then wonder why they didn't catch anything on it. So, did they ever see what that plug was doing in the daytime? I mean, I seen a lot of plugs thrown away on that jetty. Guys would throw them away after sticking it out for 4 or 5 hours without a hit, and everyone else caught fish. They would end up taking that plug and just throwing it away, just throwing it into the water. Let somebody else get lucky and find it and use it. You know what I mean? So,
what was a Conrad a big part of breezy fishing?
Oh yeah, Conrad was a staple. I mean, anything made by Danny was a staple. Anything on the deeper side, the surface swimmers, really, there were better choices in the rip. The surface swimmers worked good on the sides, especially in the fall when you had mullet runs and you had more daytime action. The surface swimmers were fantastic. But as far as at the tip, I'm sure I caught fish on surface swimmers, but there were just much better options.
Tell me, how is it the actual sequence of a cast at Breezy? Obviously, I understand the rotation thing, but are you dumping your whole line of spool of line and then just tomming it and just letting it drift and then just working it way back so that there's no fishing until it's drifting out?
Well, you're fishing anytime your line is in the water.
Well,
fishing,
I understand that, obviously, but some people might just open a spool and not paying attention, and some people might slowly let the current take it out and actually pay attention to what they're doing.
Well, I can't say how everyone else is doing it, but
I knew we were going to go there. Go ahead.
I can't say what everyone else is doing because a lot of people, like, they're letting their line out. For instance, I've seen this many times over the years. And I'm watching their line pile up in a big hole in the rocks right in front of them, and like they just don't even know. So they just keep on like peeling the line off by hand, getting themselves in a tangle, and I'm like saying to myself, well, that'll take them out for 20 minutes as soon as they realize that they're screwed up. And then sure enough, that you watch that guy shoot himself in the foot. Now he's out of the lineup for 20 minutes. So now he's not an obstacle anymore. So you see, the braided line, besides the fact that it drifts at a different rate than the monofilament line sinks. So micron floats. So if you're fishing mono, even if it was during the daytime, you can't, once your line enters the water, let's say 30 feet in front of you, you don't know what your line is doing because you can't see it. In the daytime with the braided line, you can see it. You could see probably half the spool. You can see where your line is going until it just disappears. But that line is on the very top of the water. So when you're using something with a floating line, it's not going to respond the same as when you're using something that's got a sinking line. It's kind of like using like a lead drail on your plug, if you know what I mean. It's
right.
going to take it down, whether you realize that or not. And you just have to understand that you're fishing differently than the guys who are using something that's different. I'm not saying something is better or something is worse, but if you don't understand what the difference is between the two, then then you're making it difficult on yourself when it doesn't have to be as difficult.
You were saying about the lips, and I understand what you're saying is, and I'm not going to say that I agree or disagree because your level of expertise is so far beyond mine. I just feel that a lot of times when you bend the lip to bend it back in a position, it's sometimes you screw, depending on the quality of the lip. But I understand that you can make or do anything with the lip. Obviously, it's your damn plug. You can do whatever the hell you want with it. I just find that it's easier to modify the, the tie-in, only because you only more or less changing the depth. With the lip, you're changing a lot more than the depth. That's always been my contention, not necessarily that it's better or easier, is that for most people, which you're not the most people, it was a lot easier to start with the tie-in and then go from there if they're comfortable, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, and the line tie is primarily what is adjusted, but sure, guys bend the lips too. I mean, you do whatever you think is the right thing to do, and I don't really have anything else to say.
No, I hear you. I hear you 100%, and I understand. Listen, for a guy that tests every damn plug that he owns, that the fact that somebody's going to tell you no, you can't bend the lip because that's not done. That's not going to happen. I mean, that's silly to even assume that. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Most guys, I can only speak for myself again. Like when I were to go anywhere, let's say, my metal lips were all pre-tuned. I didn't have to worry that if I picked out a plug, the hooks weren't sharp. Every plug started sharpened. Every plug is tuned. I didn't have to worry about it. All I would have to do is adjust the plug to the conditions that are present. I know what the plug was doing in the way it was presently set up, but maybe last night the rip was stronger, or the rip was weaker, or the rip was working on a different angle, and then you would just make the adjustments necessary after a while. You know exactly what you're doing. You know if you make a cast and your plug isn't swimming the way you want, I might make a cast with a plug and say, oh, you know what? I don't like the way that plug is swimming, but if I put on a slope head instead of a Conrad, it's not going to go as deep. It's going to have a wider swim. It's a different plug, so it's going to respond differently to the conditions that are there. So it's just like anything else. You just kind of get an idea of what's going on after a while, and you just do things automatically. You may not even think about doing what you're doing, but you're doing it.
Right.
So, just like anything else, it just becomes just an automatic thing.
It's funny you mentioned before about stuff looking different at night, and then you do it in the daytime, like looking at your line. Don't you find it interesting how your plugs seem to fly about 3,000 feet at night, and then you make the same cast in the daytime, and you go, oh shit, that thing doesn't cast that well at all?
No, metal lips are not good casting plugs. They don't have to really be good casting plugs. I mean, if you're fishing the rip, you only have to reach the rip.
Yeah, but I mean, everything at night seems like, even your needlefish seems like goes for miles. Everything at night looks better until you actually see it in the daytime. Even the fish looks bigger sometimes.
You know what, though? You don't cheat yourself if you just count the seconds on your cast.
There you go.
How far you can.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So...
Is there a favorite place for you to fish? Was there a favorite place that you like to fish better than others?
Well, probably out of New York. Any place out of New York was my favorite place to fish. You fish places because you can. So for me, Breezy Point was a half an hour drive for me. It wasn't that far, and it was convenient. For me to drive to Montauk for a night, that's a lot of driving. So automatically that cuts down how much time I have with my line in the water. And if I have to be back the next day, it kind of like limits things to what you could do. So sure, I'd almost rather always be in Cape Cod or Block Island or Montauk. But, Breezy Point was my local, close to the house local spot that I could fish every night if I wanted to.
Yeah, it's almost like a home spot, spots that we all have where we always kind of gravitate to, where we don't have enough either time or desire or whatever to run to whatever the place that we wanted to really be at. But it's still a good spot. That's the thing. It still has to be a good spot. It can't be a waste of time kind of spot.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I felt it afforded me my best opportunities and my best chances in proximity to where I lived. So that's where I fished. And when I wasn't catching fish there, then I would kind of try expanding, my locations. And I usually had friends at different spots. So we would kind of touch base and get an idea and things like that. But, like I mentioned, for the most part, I only fished 4 spots. That was it.
Yeah.
I didn't fish a lot. I kept my spots few and tried to learn them, each one of those 4 spots, like as good as I can. That's all.
Let me ask you something about Montauk. Let me ask you something in general. Like this online, you see it a lot. I don't know. I'm going to put this in quotes. Campo screw. Did this ever bother you? That was called Campo screws.
I never heard that term until after at least 5 years after I moved. I never heard that term. Maybe people said it. No one really spoke to me or anything. Everyone would recognize me and just wave and be cordial, the same as I was to them. But I mean, I never heard of any of this stuff, this Campo's Crew stuff. I never heard of it. Now everyone's like saying it. And I'm like, well, where did that come from? But,
I don't know. I got like an impression like somebody who doesn't know you and reads all this stuff is like Campo's got like a Batman thing where he just flies from rock to rock on a hoverboard. And, he's a Superman. He's got a Campo's crew. He's got a whole crew around him. So that's how, that's like the legend starts like that.
It's not even legend. It's just ridiculous things get said. And we never had any type, my friends and I, we never had any type of formal group or name for anything. We just all fished. So quite often our paths crossed. I mean, we would, take the house together on block or things like that. But even like in Cape Cod and things like that, I didn't say, okay, I'm going to Cape Cod today. If anyone wants to go, I just did what I wanted to go and did what I wanted to do. And the next thing you know, I'd run into a friend up there or something like that who had the same idea as I did. It was no club or anything like that.
I hear you. But another question is about when you started fishing Montauk, right? Was already a crew there that's already kind of entrenched in some way, shape, or form, right? What do they call it? Murderer's Row?
I started fishing Montauk before I started driving, so I was taken out there by several people. So by the time I did get my license, when I was 17 in my $50 station wagon, every time I buried it on the beach because I drove it up, I thought I had a 4-wheel drive. I got stuck all the time, and guys, the same handful of guys are always pulling me out, like Wilco Joe, and there were a few other ones. They would pull me out and things like that. And for the most part, I was not viewed as a threat to anybody, and people were pretty friendly to me because they saw I was just constantly there.
Right, which is basically the same thing that you did in Breezy.
No, it was a totally different crew of guys in Montauk. I mean, it was like Freck and all those guys. There was a High Hill Club was pretty big out there, and Farragut had a nice presence out there. There's a lot of club people out there.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is, in some way, there's a parallel to Breezy, meaning showing up all the time, and people seeing you show up night after night after night, where they said, "Hey, you belong here."
Exactly. Well, they may not say you belong here, but yes,
that's a little too far.
When you see somebody there night after night after night, then what are you going to say, right? They're there night after night after night. They don't just show up because, like, there was a picture of a fish in the fisherman or something like that. You're there when the fish are there, and you're there when the fish are not there. You're doing your best. But, Montauk always did have some really excellent surfcasters since day one. Since I showed up there, the caliber of the guys there were really, really good.
Well, I guess you had to be good under those conditions. I mean, they are a little more challenging conditions than in most other places that you're going to fish in their own way, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, every place has its own challenges. I mean, no doubt, Montauk was a tough place, and when the sun goes down, like I always say, it's every man for himself. Like, everyone hangs out in the parking lot together, and it doesn't matter where you are, right? It's the same when the sun goes down, you go left, I go right, somebody else goes the other way. I mean, everyone just does their own thing. It was never really anything more than that.
How did Bobby fit into all this, Glauda? In your whole fishing thing, like, where does he fit in? Like, did he help you making stuff that other people couldn't? I'm always curious this on a personal level.
Well, Bobby lived in the neighborhood, so I met him through my friend Gup and Jimmy Keller. I met him because they lived even closer together. Me and Bobby only lived 2 to 3 miles apart, but me and Gup only lived maybe 1 to 2 miles apart. And in the winter, Jimmy, Gup, he would come over a lot, or I would go over there, and we would work on a tackle together. Like, we would tie bucktails or tail, anything, we'd just hang out and spend some time together and work on our tackle. So he's the one who introduced me to Bobby. And I met Bobby's a nice guy.
Absolutely.
I met Bobby, and I got on the friendly side too. But as far as making plugs, I was making plugs before Bobby was making them. He got in with Danny, and so then Danny had called me and asked me about Bobby. And Bobby's a very mechanically inclined guy, and he makes a hell of a nice plug. And what I like about it, he doesn't go in for the gimmicks. He makes a plug to catch fish. He doesn't make a plug to look at. He makes a plug to use. And Bobby was very nice. I mean, he made me a lot of things that I asked him to make, and a few things that I asked him to make, he never did. But you could do what you could do.
Yeah, no, he was a pretty popular guy at one point, making, couldn't even make. Well, plus, I mean, I've seen him make stuff. He's very intent of doing what he wants to do, not what I don't know what other people ask for, I guess.
Well, I don't know how things seem to have been a lot easier. Well, easier and more difficult to obtain back then. Back then, people would make you whatever you wanted. I mean, as long as, don't make me one of this or one of that. But I mean, if I wanted 10 of this or 10 of that, people would make it. It wasn't a problem. Now it seems that things are more regimented in, certain colors. Only this color is available, that color is available. People would make you whatever you wanted. I mean, Danny would never turn anybody down.
What is your... Yeah, go ahead.
No, if you asked for something, he made it for you. That's all.
What is your feel on the Cowboys that Bobby made? Was there ever a plug that you used a lot?
I didn't use it a lot. It was Bobby's first original design, from what I remember, and it's got fantastic action, and it's a big fat plug, and it's a good plug. But by the time Bobby came out with the Cowboy, I'm not saying I didn't need it. I already had quite a few nice plugs. I mean, when he came out with the Cowboy, Donnie already was making the torpedo swimmers, so that was pine and maple and surface swimmer. Danny was making anything and everything. The Danny had passed before Bobby was making the Cowboys, but there was still plenty of Danny plugs available. Everybody bought Danny plugs when they were around, so I don't think anybody was caught plugless because he passed on, if you know what I mean.
Right.
People had a milk crate of Danny plugs already.
Gotcha. Well, I'm always interested on a personal level with Bobby stuff. We were friends for a while, and I respect the guy for what he does and for what he stands for. He told me he was working with Danny originally, and he was friends with you at some point and lived close to you. But I always kind of was curious of what the story was there and how much did you use. I know that's a very specialized plug for me. I've only used it in certain spots, and it's just, I don't know. It's one of those things.
Bobby and I didn't. I mean, I really didn't fish with. I don't think I ever fished with Bobby. There's a lot of people I actually never fished with. I only fished with a handful of people. Everybody just did their own thing, right? Bobby was fishing, and I was fishing wherever I was fishing. Once in a while, we'd run into each other. I mean, if he needed something, he could call me, or vice versa. But for the most part, everyone just did their own thing. It was never kind of like I would call up like somebody and say, "Hey, are you fishing tonight?" No, we thought I would go fishing if I wanted to, which was every night, and so would everyone else. It wasn't any type of a coordinated effort or let's try this spot tonight or let's do this or let's do that. No, everybody just, that's what I mean. This Campo's crew thing is crazy. People just did whatever they wanted to do.
Was there, I know that selling was a big part of let's just put it this way. Selling was a part of the scene then because it wasn't a big part of it. It's just that's the way the life was then. How big of a driver this was for you?
How big of a driver was what to me, Zeno?
Selling fish. Was this important, more important than the actual act of catching fish, or did you actually enjoy? It's strange because because the selling fish is almost. Some people assume that this is why people fish. It's like a job, but it's not.
Well, I can't speak for anybody else,
Obviously.
But I can only speak once again. Selling fish was an important aspect of fishing for me. However, it had nothing to do with the fact that I wanted to fish. It was just, all right, if you take, let's say, Breezy Point, when I started, 1976, I was probably making, I don't know, $100 a day, maybe. I don't even know. It's just a guess. So if I was making $100 a day at work, and then I was fishing all night, and I was making $100 at night fishing, well, I really didn't want to go to work the next day. So I would stay home, work on all my tackle, and get it all ready for the next night. And it was very helpful. I mean, I know guys that put additions on their houses, bought vehicles. I mean, that's how I got a lot of my plugs. It was part of fishing. That's the way it was, but it was never, ever the most important aspect to anyone that I know of. It was the same thing. Many times I walked away from, let's say, smaller fish that you could have sold and actually got paid more. You got paid more for smaller fish, but I wasn't interested in that. I would rather catch less fish and make less money, but catch bigger fish. That was always the thing for me. Selling them was just the bonus. I mean, the way I looked at it was I invested a lot of time and money into catching striped bass. So by selling the fish, I was able to recoup some of it. I know it's not a popular thing, but that's just the way it was back there. You know, every fish was like $100 bill. It's kind of hard to turn your back on that.
Sure, especially at the time where you guys didn't even have the information that the current generation have about the fisheries and all that other stuff. Not that you guys were ignorant, but you really didn't have the same info. But let me ask you something, and I'm going to just close on this. Like, is there any regret on that part of generation? Now, you can't speak for everyone, but is there any regret on your part for not maybe doing more to protect the fish?
No, I have no regrets at all. I really don't. None of the fish that I caught went to waste. They were sold and people ate them. And the way I looked at it, if they weren't eating my fish, they were going to be eating your fish, but they're still going to be eating the fish. And back then, you got to remember, the limit was 16 inches for a striped bass. I mean, that's like 3 pounds, or not even 3 pounds. I mean, there were guys who were, I'm not trying to justify my own actions, but there were guys who were targeting those fish, and they were literally filling up Boston whalers at the tin can grounds with little stripers and things like that. They had shorts piled up inside of walk-in boxes. There had to be multiple thousands of fish there. And I said, "Aren't those fish all shorts?" And he said, "Wake up, Sonny." That's all he said. "Wake up, Sonny," as if like I'm the only guy not selling shorts. And I never sold a short. But that's just the way it was. And I'm certainly not trying to condone the actions, but it was a money fish. Guys were targeting it. Guys were making a living selling their fish. Mostly boat guys, I assume. But guys who are doing it, for me, I looked at it a lot differently. I was just trying to get back some of my investment. And, you know, fishing every night, it gets expensive. You know, 20, 30, 40 bucks for fuel, you lose a plug. I mean, there's always like a few things. And then it affects your ability to earn the next day if you're supposed to be working. So it was just a way to supplement my income and allow me to continue to fish. That's all it was. Once I wasn't able to sell fish, I still fished.
Yeah, well, that was my next question. So it got to the point where you guys couldn't sell fish anymore, correct?
Right. So I just threw them back.
And how did that feel? In the beginning, it must have been weird, I have to say, after all those years of fishing.
It felt pretty. I liked it better when I was able to sell them. I'm just being honest.
Well, no, as you should be. I mean, I would.
It was kind of like, you know, if I would go away for the fall for 2 months, that's a lot of money to not. 2 months of a salary is a lot of money to do without. And it became just a one-way drag, whereas even if I do good, I'm not doing good, because even if I'm catching fish and I can't sell them, it's still costing me thousands of dollars to do it. So, you know, yeah, I still did it, but I honestly just didn't enjoy it as much. I did enjoy the aspect of being able to sell a fish. I'm just being honest. It was, I'm not saying it was right or it was wrong. I'm saying that the law said you could sell them, so I sold them.
Yeah, I got you. No, listen, I don't judge. My generation, I grew up in Europe, and my grandfather fished all his life, and we sold fish. To sustain himself, that wasn't There's a different mindset and all that today, and people should really take this in a context of when was it happening, not that this is happening today, where someone says like you can't catch, you can't sell fish because it hasn't been done in so many years. I just thought it was kind of strange to be living at times, obviously you guys lived through it, where one day you could sell the fish that you used to, that you've been done it for 50 years, and then the next day somebody said, and with the right, don't get me wrong, I totally agree with what they did, but for you guys it must have been a big difference. Like I know that you have taken a lot of time away from your job to do months at a time to go in the fall, that all costs money. It's not free.
Exactly. No, it does, and that's always been the thing for me is like if I could go away for 2 months and come back with the same money I went with, it's a win-win. Maybe not for the fish, but it was a win-win for me. I get to do what I love doing more than anything else like that, and I was in a position where I was lucky to do it. That's just the way I look at it. If it was, I was born in another time and in a different era, maybe things would have been different. I can't say, but I was born at the time, and I was in on the very, very, very tail end on it. The guys who were really doing numbers and stuff they were in the 60s and probably the 50s. Yeah, I mean, I seen in Montauk, I remember on the sand beach there. I know they say the whole sanders don't catch nearly as much as the hook and line fishermen, but I remember I was fishing that sand beach in the dark for several hours that night. I remember I didn't have a single hit. So just at daylight, the whole sander crews come down, and I watched them set their net. And in that one set, they caught more bass than I ever caught in my entire life put together in that one set. So when I saw that, in my mind, it was like a joke what I'm catching compared to, how are you going to compare, let's say, 30 years of casting to an hour whole seine set? You know what I mean? It's so.
And that's just one inefficient one from the beach. Never mind all the boats, what they can do with the nets.
Well, and again, I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody.
I'm not saying that you do, but I'm saying that the point that you're making is valid.
Well, and that's the way I looked at it. I was kind of like looking like all those fish that guy just netted, and I couldn't fool one of those fish into hitting my plug. You know what I mean? That's just the way I looked at it. It's like, boy, I've never had anything rubbed in my face so bad before than that. I never had a hit. And it seemed like I couldn't even make a cast without snagging a bass. They had so many. So, I just did. I just sold my fish because that's just the way it was since I was a little kid. When I was catching flounders, I would sell them, or blues or snappers, anything. I would just, anything to be able to buy a lure. That's just the way it was. And that's just the way everyone did it back then. It's just the way, just like when you learn to ride a bike, most people learn to ride a bike with training wheels, and they take the training wheels off. Well, that's kind of how I felt that I was groomed by people. It was like everyone sold their fish. So I did too. That just seemed to be the way it was.
I don't have any more questions. Anything else you want to add? Because we can do this every Sunday for 3 hours and we'll be here forever. Because you have so many stories and so much to tell. But is there anything that you want to make sure that the people remember?
Just the only thing I could say is probably anything you hear has been blown out of proportion and exaggerated. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've heard that, first of all, I heard that the, let's say, Murderers Row did not like your crew, Campo's crew, in quotes, because you guys were like the loud, and they were like the old guard and you were the new guard. Like, that's one of the things that goes around. You guys are cutting people's lines because you didn't like them fishing. Like, all this shit is really bullshit. To me, none of this is true.
Well, I can't say anything about cutting. I could say I've never cut anyone's line, and no one that I know has ever cut anyone's line and told me that they have. That's the only thing I could think of. As far as the Murderers Row guys, I was fairly friendly with them individually, but they hung out with their guys, and I hung out with by myself or with a couple of my friends. I don't think we had any ill feelings towards each other that I'm aware of.
I'm just saying this is all bullshit. I mean,
no, nothing that I'm aware of. Like I said, I knew most of them and we talked to them regularly. So, yeah, they were there before me, but I was there, well, since the late 60s anyway.
All right, let me say something here. Okay, so there's a lot of stories out there about what you have accomplished, who you were, what your quote-unquote crew was, which was just basically a bunch of friends fishing. But if I have to define Steve Campo, how would you define them? How would a person define what Steve Campo was, not what is written today by people that don't even know you? I
really don't know. I don't really know. I just was a guy who liked to go fishing a lot, and I basically wasn't really happy with a lot of the products that were available to use. So I feel that why should I use things that are working against my success when I could just change things to work in a manner that is more efficient for myself? That's all. I don't really understand why anyone's interested in anything I did to begin with. So I just find this whole thing so strange, to tell you the truth. Like I said, the whole time I was fishing, nobody even said boo. They would just wave hello and goodbye, and that was it. But I mean, then as soon as you stop fishing, you hear all these ridiculous stories. I've heard so many ridiculous stories over the years that I wonder where they even originate from. But I don't really have anything to say other than I was just a guy who went fishing, no different from any other guy who went fishing. I just went a lot.
I love that. And I'm going to ask you a last question. What is the most ridiculous story that you ever heard?
There's so many ridiculous stories. I just can't even, I couldn't even put my finger on anything. But I've heard a lot of ridiculous stories. It's kind of like, they're just so ridiculous. It was like one night at the tip of the jetty. This wasn't me. It was my friend. He was there. This guy shows up and he starts going into this big spiel how you should have been here last night and this, that. So no one said anything to him. So this guy spoke his piece for 15 minutes. And then my friend just turned to him and said, "You are so full of it." I said, "I was out here last night for both tides. You weren't even here." But I mean, that's what they mean. It's like people just make things up. They just fabricate things.
I agree with that 100%. But I guess my question was, what is the craziest story that you read about yourself that it's not true, that's simply invented, that you've read online that people were like, when you read it, you were like, no, this is not what happened?
There's just so many. Basically, nothing I've ever read is true.
Okay.
So, nothing I ever read is true. There's only the people that I fished with who knows what I caught and I know what they caught. And no one said anything to anyone else. So how's anyone going to know anything? So they just make things up. It's,
So you denied being a supernatural and Superman, right? Just joking.
Very much so. I can say that I can pretty much guarantee that I've been skunked more than anybody else and gone more nights without a hit than anybody else. So it's just like anything else. The more times you go, the luckier you get.